The great chamber of the Galactic Council stretched upward like a cathedral built for giants. Thousands of seats rose in concentric circles, each occupied by representatives from the many species that called the galaxy home. Holographic displays floated in the air, translating speeches into hundreds of languages simultaneously. The air itself hummed with technology so advanced it seemed like magic. Ambassador G1 Park stood alone at the center of it all. A single human woman, facing judgment from an entire galaxy. Her dark suit was simple compared to the elaborate robes and armor worn by the alien delegates surrounding her. She kept her hands clasped behind her back, her posture straight despite the exhaustion weighing on her shoulders. She had not slept in 3 days. The emergency sessions had bled together into one long nightmare. Above her, the Grand Arbiter of the Velrathi Empire rose from his seat. He was massive, nearly 3 meters tall, with scales that shimmered like polished bronze, his 4 eyes fixed on G1 with something that might have been pity if she had not known better. Ambassador Park. His voice boomed through translation devices. The Council has reviewed humanity's response to our proposal. We find it insufficient. G1 felt her jaw tighten but kept her voice steady. With respect, Grand Arbiter, your proposal was not a proposal at all. It was a demand for surrender. A ripple of chittering and electronic buzzing moved through the chamber. Some species were scandalized by her directness. Others seemed amused. The Grand Arbiter's scales darkened slightly, a sign of displeasure that G1 had learned to recognize over her 5 years in this chamber. We asked only that humanity accept the protection of more experienced civilizations, the Arbiter said smoothly. Your species is young. Barely 2 centuries since you achieved faster-than-light travel. You lack the wisdom to wield the military forces you have constructed. You asked us to dismantle our entire defense fleet. G1 replied, her voice carrying clearly through the vast space. You asked us to place our colonies under foreign military occupation. You asked us to surrender our sovereignty and trust that you would keep us safe. She paused, letting her next words hang in the air. Yet 3 of our colonies have been destroyed by unknown raiders in the past year alone. Raiders that appeared and vanished without a trace. Raiders that somehow knew exactly when our patrol schedules left certain sectors vulnerable. The silence that followed was heavy and dangerous. G1 had just accused the Council of either incompetence or complicity. Neither accusation would be forgiven easily. A new voice spoke up, clicking and whistling through translators. Ambassador Zixtar of the Chitauri rose from his seat, his insectoid body gleaming under the chamber lights. The human raises valid concerns. The timing of these attacks is suspicious, and the proposed terms are far harsher than any previously imposed on council members. The Chitauri would defend them, hissed Representative Veksh of the Kresh Dominion. The reptilian delegate's hood flared wide. Your species has always been soft on the younger races. This is why you remain weak. We remain principled, Zixtar shot back. Something the Kresh seemed to have forgotten. The Grand Arbiter raised one massive hand, calling for silence. The gesture was casual, but the power behind it was clear. The Velrathi Empire controlled nearly a quarter of the galaxy. When they spoke, others listened. The Council's concerns are simple. The Arbiter continued, his gaze fixed on G1 once more. Humanity has demonstrated unprecedented military advancement. Your ships, though fewer in number than ours, match or exceed our capabilities in individual combat. Your soldiers train with an intensity that borders on fanaticism. Your weapons development proceeds at a pace that alarms even our most liberal members. We train because we have to, G1 said quietly. We build because we must. Earth was nearly destroyed twice by our own hands before we reached the stars. We learned what happens when you are not strong enough to defend what you love. We learned what happens when you trust that others will save you. And that is precisely what concerns us, said Matriarch Yilzara of the Eshkari Collective, the crystalline being pulsed with pale blue light as she spoke. Your species carries trauma like a weapon. You see threats everywhere. Your military doctrine is built on paranoia and aggression, disguised as defense. G1 wanted to scream. She wanted to show them the recordings from the colonies that had been burned. She wanted to parade the survivors who had watched their families die while waiting for help that never came. But she knew it would not matter. This decision had been made long before she entered this chamber. "We have weapons because the galaxy is dangerous," she said instead, her voice carefully controlled. "We maintain our fleets because we cannot afford to trust our safety to others, and we refuse your offer. Because we have seen what happens to species that surrender their ability to defend themselves. They become vassals. They become slaves. They become extinct." Dramatic words, the Grand Arbiter said, with what might have been a smile. But ultimately irrelevant. The Council has voted, by a margin of 317 to 42, with 16 abstentions. We have determined that humanity poses an unacceptable risk to galactic stability. The words landed like a physical blow. G1 had known this was coming. But hearing it spoken aloud still hurt. She forced herself to remain standing, to keep her face neutral, even as her heart pounded. "Therefore," the Arbiter continued, "humanity is hereby expelled from the Galactic Council. All human colonies within core territorial space must be evacuated within 30 standard days. Any human vessels remaining in Council space after that deadline will be considered hostile and will be destroyed. This is the will of the Council." The chamber erupted into noise. Some delegates cheered. Others shouted protests. The Chitauri delegation walked out entirely, their clicking voices raised in anger. The Nelvar, the aquatic species who had been humanity's first friends in the stars, clustered together in their water-filled observation tanks, their lights flickering in what G1 had learned meant distress. But the vote was final. The Velrathi had spent years building their coalition, promising favors and threatening consequences. The Kresh wanted humanity gone because they saw them as competition. The Ashkari supported it out of fear. And the dozens of smaller species voted with them because they were afraid of what would happen if they did not. G1 stood in the center of the chamber and felt the weight of billions of lives pressing down on her shoulders. 43 human colonies, 18 billion people, all to be uprooted and driven into the wilderness of the galactic rim because they had refused to be helpless. "Ambassador Park," the Grand Arbiter said, his voice gentler now, as if that could somehow soften the blow. "We take no joy in this, but your species must learn that there are consequences for defiance. Perhaps, in a few generations, if humanity has matured sufficiently, you may petition for readmission." Something inside G1 broke then. Not her composure, she was too well trained for that, but something deeper. Some last shred of hope that reason and justice might prevail. She looked up at the Grand Arbiter and all the delegates arrayed behind him. She looked at the species who had voted to exile humanity for the crime of being strong enough to defend themselves. And she smiled. It was not a happy smile. It was the smile of someone who had just realized that the game was rigged and decided to stop playing by the rules. "You are making a mistake," she said softly. Her voice was barely above a whisper, but in the sudden silence, it carried to every corner of the vast chamber. "You exile us because you fear what we might become. But you should fear what you are turning us into." "Is that a threat?" Vex demanded, his hood flaring again. "No," G1 said. "It is a prediction. You are sending my people into the dark, into the cold, empty places where no one goes. You are taking everything we built and burning it. You are teaching us that the galaxy has no justice, no mercy for those who are different or difficult or dangerous." She turned slowly, meeting the eyes of every delegate she could see. "We will remember this. We will remember who stood with us and who abandoned us. We will remember that when we needed help, you gave us exile. And when you need us, and you will need us, we will remember what you taught us here today." The Grand Arbiter's scales darkened to nearly black. You have 30 days, Ambassador. I suggest you use them wisely. This session is concluded. The holographic displays blinked out. The delegates began filing out of the chamber, already moving on to other business. To them, this was just another day. Another vote. Another problem. Solved. But G1 remained standing in the center of the empty chamber long after everyone else had gone. She thought about her daughter, just 12 years old, waiting for her in the embassy. She thought about her parents, retired on New Sol Colony, the home they would have to abandon. She thought about the millions of soldiers who had trained so hard, who had believed that their strength would keep their families safe. She thought about what was coming. The evacuation would be chaos. They would lose people. There was no way to move 18 billion humans in 30 days without casualties. Ships would be overloaded. Supplies would run short. Some colonies were so remote that they might not even receive the evacuation orders in time. And all of it because the Council feared humanity's potential more than they valued humanity's friendship. G1 finally moved, walking slowly toward the exit. Her footsteps echoed in the empty chamber. As she reached the door, she stopped and looked back one last time at the place where humanity's fate had been decided. You could have had us as allies, she whispered to the empty air. Instead, you will have us as a memory, or as something worse. Time will tell which. Then she stepped through the door and went to tell her people that they were going into exile. Behind her, the lights in the great chamber slowly dimmed. The holographic displays powered down. The seats that humanity had occupied for 2 brief centuries stood empty. The Council had made its decision. Now they would live with the consequences. But so would humanity. And in the end, only one of them would emerge stronger. The first decade was the worst. Zixtar stood in the observation gallery of his personal ship, watching the stars drift past, and tried not to think about the numbers. 8 billion dead. Nearly half of humanity's population, gone in the chaos of the evacuation and the brutal first years on the galactic rim. He had tried to help. The Chitauri had offered transport, supplies, sanctuary on some of their outer colonies. But it had not been enough. Nothing could have been enough. 18 billion people could not be moved across half a galaxy in 30 days, and the Council had known that when they set the deadline. The Velrathi battle groups had enforced it enthusiastically. Any human ship that missed the deadline was destroyed without warning. Entire colonies had been bombarded from orbit when their evacuation transports failed to arrive in time. The Council called it maintaining order. Zixtar called it murder, but he was just one voice. And the Chitauri were not strong enough to stand against the Velrathi Empire alone. So he had watched, helpless, as his friends were driven into the dark. That had been 200 years ago. 2 centuries that Zixtar had spent fighting a losing battle to keep humanity's seat in the Council empty rather than dissolved entirely. It was a symbolic gesture, meaningless in practical terms, but it was all he could do. Ambassador, his aide's voice chirped from the doorway. Zixtar clicked his mandibles in acknowledgement. Another council session. Another debate about nothing important. While the galaxy slowly tore itself apart, he wondered if anyone else noticed the patterns he had been tracking for the past 50 years. The Velrathi Empire had nearly doubled in size since humanity's exile. They claimed it was peaceful expansion, worlds joining them voluntarily for protection. But Zixtar had seen the casualty reports from those peaceful integrations. Entire species absorbed, their militaries dissolved, their governments replaced with Velrathi administrators. The Kresh Dominion had responded by militarizing even further. Every Kresh citizen was now required to serve in the military for at least 10 years. Their border fleets had tripled in size. Incidents between Kresh and Velrathi ships were becoming more frequent and more violent. And the raids continued. The same mysterious attackers that had struck human colonies before the exile now ranged freely across Council space. They hit civilian targets, mostly cargo ships, agricultural worlds, mining stations, places that could not defend themselves. The attacks followed a pattern that Zixtar had spent years documenting. But whenever he presented his evidence to the Council, it was dismissed. The raiders always struck when Velrothi patrol schedules left sectors undefended. They used weapons consistent with Velrothi design, but with identifying markers removed. And they never, ever, attacked Velrothi interests. Zixtar had no proof, nothing that would hold up in a council investigation. But he knew the truth. The Velrothi had killed human colonies to justify humanity's exile. Now they raided other species to keep the council afraid and dependent on Velrothi protection. It was brilliant and horrifying in equal measure. "Ambassador," his aide chirped again. "There is something else. A report from the rim sectors. Another patrol fleet has gone missing." Zixtar turned away from the stars. "Which species?" "Velrati. An entire battle group, 23 ships, including a heavy cruiser. They were conducting long-range reconnaissance near the old human territories, and they missed their scheduled check-in 6 days ago. When a search party was dispatched, they found nothing. No debris, no distress signals, no trace they were ever there." Zixtar felt his antennae twitch with interest. This was the 4th Velrothi patrol to vanish near the rim in the past 3 years. The Grand Arbiter blamed it on navigational errors or equipment failures. But Zixtar wondered. The rim was dangerous, uncharted space. Strange, stellar phenomena. Abandoned territories, but trained military crews did not simply disappear. "Have there been any other reports from that region?" he asked. His aide consulted a data tablet. "Yes, actually. Several civilian ships reported strange sensor readings. Unidentified vessels moving at speeds that should not be possible. Energy signatures that do not match any known drive system. But all the reports are unverified. Probably just sensor glitches or debris fields." "Probably," Zixtar agreed. But his mind was already working. The old human territories. Strange disappearances. Unknown ships. He thought about G1 Park, the human ambassador he had called friend. She had sent him one message after the evacuation was complete. Just a single line. "We will survive. Tell no one." That had been 187 years ago. He had honored her request, telling the council that humanity had scattered into the rim and likely perished. Most believed it. Some even celebrated it. But Zixtar had always wondered. Humans were survivors. They had nearly destroyed themselves twice before reaching the stars. And each time they had rebuilt stronger than before. Would they really let exile break them? Or would they do what they always did, endure, adapt, and emerge transformed? "Monitor all reports from the rim sectors," Zixtar ordered. "Everything, no matter how minor or unverified. I want to know about every strange reading, every missing ship, every unusual sighting." "Yes, Ambassador. May I ask why?" Zixtar clicked his mandibles in what might have been a smile. "Because I think someone is coming back, and I want to know if they return as friends or as something else." The years continued to pass. The council sessions blurred together, each one more contentious than the last. The Velrothi pushed for more authority, more military integration, more control over member species' defenses. The Kresh resisted and built up their fleets in response. Smaller species were caught in the middle, forced to choose sides in a cold war that grew hotter with each passing season. And the reports from the rim continued. More missing patrols, more sensor anomalies, more whispers of ghost ships that appeared and vanished like phantoms. The Velrothi tried to keep it quiet, but information had a way of spreading. Spacers talked in port bars. Merchants gossiped on trade routes. Survivors of near encounters spoke of ships that moved like nothing they had ever seen, that seemed to bend light and space around them. Zixtar collected every report, every rumor, every scrap of data. He built a picture in his mind of something moving in the dark spaces of the rim, something that watched the galaxy with unknown intent, something that had learned to hide and hunt in the places where no one else dared to go. One day, a young Nelvar merchant came to see him. Her name was Salis, and she had inherited her family's trading company after her parents died in a raid 30 years earlier. She was nervous, her bioluminescent skin flickering with anxiety as she floated in her mobile water tank in Zixtar's office. "Ambassador," she said, "I have information about the Rim, about what is out there." "I am listening," Zixtar replied. "My ship was attacked by raiders 3 months ago. We were hauling medical supplies to a colony in the outer territories. 5 pirate vessels, all Velrothi design, though they claim to be independent. They disabled our engines and prepared to board." Zixtar leaned forward. He had heard this story 1,000 times, but something in Salas's tone suggested this one would be different. Then another ship appeared. Salas continued. "Just one. It was like nothing I had ever seen. All smooth curves and dark metal that seemed to absorb light. The pirates opened fire immediately. Their weapons had no effect. The strange ship did not even bother with shields. The energy blasts just dissipated before they hit the hull." "Go on," Zixtar said softly. "The ship disabled all 5 pirate vessels in less than a minute. Not destroyed, disabled. Weapons offline. Engines dead. Life support maintained. Then it hailed us. The voice that came through was human." Zixtar's antennae shot up. "Human? You are certain?" "Absolutely certain." A woman's voice, speaking perfect Galactic common. She said, "You are safe now. The raiders will be delivered to the nearest council outpost. We apologize for not arriving sooner." Salas's skin flickered rapidly. Then she said something else. She said, "Tell them humanity remembers its friends. Did you get a sensor reading of the ship?" "We tried. Our systems couldn't make sense of what they were detecting. Energy outputs that should be impossible. Gravitational distortions that suggested the ship was generating its own localized field. And the speeds, Ambassador. When it left, it accelerated faster than anything I have ever seen. It was like watching something shift from our reality into another." Zixtar was quiet for a long moment. Then he asked the question he needed answered most. "What happened to the pirates?" "Day. They were found 3 days later, exactly where the humans said they would be. All alive, unharmed, except for damaged pride. Their ships were disabled so completely that engineers had to tow them back to dock. The Velrothi authorities claimed it must have been a malfunction. They said, the pirates disabled themselves. But you do not believe that. I know what I saw, Ambassador. Humanity did not die in the Rim. They evolved there. And now, they are coming back." After Salas left, Zixtar sat in his office for hours, thinking, 200 years, 10 human generations, maybe more given their short lifespans. A civilization driven into the harshest regions of the galaxy, forced to survive in places where even the most desperate refugees feared to go. What would that do to a species? What would they become? The old humanity had been warriors and builders, quick to anger and quick to forgive, fierce in defending their own but open to friendship with others. They had been young and idealistic and dangerous in the way of all young things that do not yet know their own strength. But the humanity coming back would have been forged by 2 centuries of suffering. They would have buried billions of their dead. They would have learned to hate the galaxy that exiled them, or learned to survive without it, or learned something else entirely. Zixtar made a decision then. He composed a message using codes that humanity had given him 200 years ago. Codes he had never used because he had promised not to make contact unless it was vital. The message was simple. Old friend, if you still live, know that you have allies still. But others will see your return as a threat. Be careful. The galaxy is not ready for what it has made you become. He transmitted the message toward the Rim and waited. The response came 3 days later. Just 2 words that made Zixtar's heart soar and sink at the same time. We know. Humanity was coming home. The only question was whether they came for reunion or for reckoning. Zixtar suspected it might be both. The merchant station Crosswinds drifted at the edge of what used to be human space. Once, it had been a thriving hub where human traders met their alien counterparts to exchange goods and stories. Now it served as a reminder of absence, a memorial to a species that most of the galaxy had forgotten. Captain Temar of the Nelvar merchant vessel Steady Current did not come here for nostalgia. He came because the routes through this region were faster and less patrolled, which meant fewer bribes to pay and fewer questions to answer about his cargo. His crew was small, just 6, Nelvar. All family, all veterans of the dangerous trade routes where pirates prowled and council patrols looked the other way. They knew how to fight if they had to, but they preferred to run. Their ship was fast, their sensors sharp, and their luck had held for 15 years. Today, their luck ran out. Captain, his daughter Mira called from the sensor station, her bioluminescent skin flashing orange in alarm. Multiple contacts emerging from the debris field. 5 ships, closing fast. Tamar felt his swim bladders tighten with stress. Configuration? Velrothi design. Raider class. They are hailing us. Of course they were. This was how it always went. The raiders would demand cargo, credits, anything of value. If you paid, they might let you go. If you resisted, they took everything, including your life. And if you reported them, nothing happened because the raiders were usually Velrothi independents, who somehow never faced justice in Velrothi courts. Put them through, Timar said, keeping his voice calm for his crew. The face that appeared on screen was Velrothi's scaled and four-eyed, with the hood markings that indicated low caste. These were not military deserters, playing pirate. These were actual criminals, which somehow made them more dangerous because they had nothing to lose. Nelvar vessel. The pirate leader hissed. You will power down your engines and prepare to be boarded. Resist, and you die. Cooperate, and you will only lose your cargo. Choose now. Nelvar vessel, RUP. Tamar's fins drooped. They were hauling medical supplies bound for a colony suffering from plague. If he surrendered the cargo, hundreds would die. But if he resisted, his family would die. There was no good choice. We are powering down, he said quietly, hating himself but seeing no alternative. The pirate grinned, showing rows of sharp teeth. Smart fish. Mira worked frantically at her station, sending out distress signals that would reach the nearest council patrol in maybe 6 hours. Too late to help, but at least someone would know what happened. Maybe the council would pretend to investigate. Maybe the pirates would be embarrassed into leaving this route alone for a few months. Captain, Mira said suddenly, her skin flashing from orange to blue, the color of confusion. New contact. Single ship. Emerging from the solar shadow behind the second moon, Temar felt a flutter of hope. Perhaps a council patrol had been closer than expected. Configuration? Configuration. Unknown. I have never seen anything like it. The energy signature is completely wrong. The hull composition is not reading on any of our databases. The hull composition. On the view screen, the pirate leader had noticed too. He was shouting at someone off-screen, probably demanding his own sensor operator explain what was happening. Then Tamar saw it with his own eyes as the new ship glided into view, and his breath caught in his throat. It was beautiful in a way that made his skin prickle with instinctive unease. The hull was dark. So dark, it seemed to drink in the light of the nearby star. The shape was all flowing curves with no hard edges, organic somehow, like it had been grown rather than built. Energy flickered across its surface in patterns that hurt to look at directly, electricity, or plasma, or something else entirely, dancing across the hull in configurations that should not be possible. And it was big. Not as large as a Velrothi battlecruiser, but substantial. Maybe 3 times the size of his own ship. Big enough to matter in a fight. The pirate leader had recovered from his surprise. Unknown vessel. This is a lawful salvage operation. Withdraw immediately, or face destruction. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, a voice came over the open channel, a voice speaking Galactic Common, with an accent that Tamar recognized from ancient recordings. Human. Velrothi vessel, the voice said. It belonged to a woman. Calm and professional, and carrying the weight of absolute confidence. This is Commander Sarah Okafor, of the Terran Reclamation Fleet. You are engaged in piracy against a civilian vessel in violation of 17 different Council statutes. Power down your weapons and prepare to surrender. The pirate leader laughed. Terran? Humanity is extinct. Ghost. Whoever you are, turn around before we add your ship to our collection. Last warning, Commander Okafor said. The pirates opened fire. All 5 ships unleashed their weapons simultaneously. Plasma cannons, kinetic accelerators, missile batteries. Enough firepower to reduce Tamar's ship to debris in seconds. All of it focused on the strange, dark vessel. Tamar watched in horror as the barrage streaked toward the human ship. He had seen weapons fire before, had watched ships torn apart by forces that could boil metal and shatter hulls. He knew what was about to happen. Except nothing happened. The weapons simply stopped. Plasma bolts dissipated 3 meters from the hull as if hitting an invisible wall. Kinetic rounds froze in space, suspended by forces Tamar could not comprehend. Missiles went dark, their guidance systems scrambling, then gently drifted away like leaves on a current. The human ship had not activated shields. It had not moved to evade. It had simply negated the attack, as if the pirates were children throwing stones at a fortress. Your turn, Commander Okafor said. The human ship moved. But moved was the wrong word. It did not accelerate the way ships were supposed to accelerate, building up speed over time. One moment it was distant. The next it was among the pirate vessels, weaving between them like a dancer in a performance. Blue-white energy lanced out from points along its hull. Not weapons in the traditional sense, there were no gun ports, no visible emplacements. The energy just appeared, reaching out to touch each pirate ship in turn. Systems died. Engines went dark. Weapons powered down. Life support stayed online. The human ship was careful about that, but everything else simply stopped working. In less than 30 seconds, all 5 pirate vessels were dead in space, helpless, and drifting. The human ship returned to its position near Tamar's vessel. Its movements were so precise, so controlled, that it seemed unreal, like watching a simulation instead of actual physics. Nelvar vessel steady current. Commander Okafor's voice came through again. You are safe. We apologize for not arriving sooner. Are there any casualties? Well, Targ. Tamar found his voice. No. No casualties. We are unharmed. He paused, then added, You are human? Truly? There was a hint of warmth in the commander's voice when she responded, We are. Humanity survived, Captain Tamar, and we have not forgotten our friends. A view screen activated aboard Tamar's ship, showing the interior of the human vessel's bridge. The woman who appeared was tall for a human, with dark skin and close-cropped hair. She wore a uniform that was sleek and black, with subtle armor plating integrated into the design. Behind her, Tamar could see other humans working at stations that did not look like any ship controls he recognized. Everything was smooth interfaces and holographic displays that responded to gesture and thought as much as touch. Commander Sarah Okafor, the woman said with a slight smile. Formerly of the United Earth Defense Force, currently of the Terran Reclamation Fleet. We have been monitoring pirate activity in this region for some time. Your distress signal allowed us to triangulate and respond. The pirates, Tamar said. What will you do with them? Deliver them to the nearest council outpost with full documentation of their crimes. They will face justice under council law. Her smile turned slightly sharper. Or what passes for justice these days? They will claim mechanical failure. They will say they disabled themselves, that you were never here. The Velrothi authorities will believe them. Perhaps, Sarah agreed. But we will be watching. And the next time they try to hurt someone, we will be there too. She leaned forward slightly. Captain, I need you to carry a message. Can you do that for us? Of course. Anything. Tell the Council that humanity has returned. Tell them we survived the exile. Tell them we are not the same species they cast out 200 years ago. And tell them. She paused, choosing her words carefully. Tell them we remember our friends. And we remember our enemies. Tamar's skin flickered through several colors as he processed that. They will be afraid. They should be, Sarah said simply. But not for the reasons they think. We did not return for revenge, Captain. We returned because the galaxy needs what we have become. And what is that? Sarah's expression softened. Guardians. Protectors. The thing we were always meant to be. Refined by suffering and tempered by loss. She glanced at something off-screen. We need to leave soon. Our patrol route continues. But first your cargo. You are hauling medical supplies to the Koresh colony? Tamar blinked in surprise. How did you know? We make it our business to know. The plague there is worse than the Council reports admit. You will need to take specific precautions when you arrive. I am transmitting decontamination protocols and treatment guidelines. Our medical technology has advanced significantly. These protocols should reduce the mortality rate by at least 40%. Data began flowing into Steady Current's computers. Tamar watched in amazement as files upon files of detailed medical information appeared, far more comprehensive than anything in the Council's databases. Commander, he said slowly. How advanced is your technology now? Sarah's smile was enigmatic. Advanced enough, Captain. Advanced enough. Advanced enough. 41. Advanced enough. Advanced enough. The human ship began to move away, its dark hull reflecting the starlight in patterns that seemed almost alive. Tamar had 1,000 questions, but he knew he would get no more answers today. One more thing, Sarah called out. Give our regards to Ambassador Zixtar. Tell him old friends are grateful he kept faith with us. Tell him we will see him soon. Then the human ship accelerated, and Tamar understood why his sensors had shown impossible readings. The vessel did not just move fast, it seemed to fold space around itself, compressing distance, turning physics into suggestion rather than law. One moment it was there, the next it was a light hour away, then it was gone entirely. Vanishing into the deep dark between stars, Tamar's crew stared at the space where it had been. Finally, his son Chorus spoke up from the engineering station. Father, I recorded everything. Sensor logs, visual data, communications. The Council will want proof. The Council will not believe it, Tamar's wife said quietly. They will say we are lying or mistaken. They will say humans are extinct, that we saw something else, that our sensors malfunctioned. Then what do we do? Mira asked. Tamar thought about Commander Okafor's message. He thought about the casual, effortless way she had disabled 5 pirate ships. He thought about technology so advanced it seemed like magic, and humans who had survived 2 centuries in the most hostile regions of the galaxy. We tell the truth, he said. And we let the galaxy choose whether to believe it or not. But either way, everything just changed. Humanity came back. And I think the Council is about to learn what happens when you exile your potential saviors and turn them into something greater than they were before. He set course for the nearest Council outpost, where 5 disabled pirate ships waited to be collected, where evidence of humanity's return would be undeniable. The galaxy had forgotten about humanity, but humanity had not forgotten about the galaxy. And now, whether the Council wanted it or not, the exiles were coming home. The Grand Council chamber looked exactly as it had 200 years ago, when humanity was cast out. The same towering walls, the same 1,000 seats, rising in circles, the same holographic displays, translating everything into countless languages, even some of the same species. Their leaders apparently immortal, or at least very long-lived. But the human standing at the center of the chamber was not G1 Park. She had died 50 years ago, peacefully in her sleep, on one of humanity's new worlds, beyond the rim. Her funeral had been attended by millions who remembered what she had sacrificed. Admiral Min-Jun Lee stood where Ji-won had stood 2 centuries before. He was tall, his features Korean like his surname suggested, his black uniform marked with insignias that meant nothing to anyone in the chamber. 2 soldiers flanked him, honor guards in armor that seemed to absorb light, their faces hidden behind helmets that showed no expression. The whispers had started the moment Min-Jun entered. Humanity was supposed to be extinct, scattered, and broken. Instead, here stood a human admiral with technology that made council members nervous just looking at it. The guard's armor alone represented materials science that should not exist. Grand Arbiter Kelvin of the Velrathi Empire, grandson of the Arbiter, who had exiled humanity, rose from his seat. He was younger than his predecessor, but just as imposing, scales polished to mirror brightness. Admiral Lee, Kelvin's voice boomed. You have requested an emergency session to petition for humanity's reinstatement to the Galactic Council. This is highly irregular given that your species is listed as extinct in our records. Min-Jun's expression did not change. Our extinction was greatly exaggerated, Grand Arbiter, and prematurely celebrated by some in this chamber. A ripple of angry chittering and electronic buzzing swept through the seats. Several delegates leaned forward, their faces showing hostility or fear. Only a few, the Chitauri, the Nelvar. A handful of others looked relieved or even happy. Ambassador Zixtar, older now but still sharp, clicked his mandibles in what might have been approval. He had prepared the council for this moment, arguing for weeks that humanity's return should be met with openness rather than hostility. Most had ignored him, but no one could ignore the reality standing before them now. Humanity survived. Min-Jun continued, his voice carrying clearly through the vast space. 200 years ago, you gave us 30 days to evacuate 18 billion people from 43 colonies. Many of you in this chamber voted for that exile, knowing full well that the deadline was impossible to meet, knowing that thousands of my people would die trying. The silence was heavy and uncomfortable. Everyone remembered the vote. Everyone knew what had really happened. The first 10 years were the hardest, Min-Jun said. His voice remained steady, but there was steel underneath. 8 billion dead, nearly half our population, starvation, exposure. Ships overloaded beyond safety limits that cracked apart in jump space. Colonies that made it to the rim, only to find worlds that could barely support life. We watched our children die of cold and hunger while the galaxy moved on, forgetting we existed. He let that sink in for a moment. Then he smiled. And it was not a pleasant expression. But we did not die. Humans are very difficult to kill completely. We adapted. We learned. We built. And we discovered things in the dark places where you sent us. Things that changed everything. With a gesture, Min-Jun activated holographic displays that materialized around him. Images of alien structures appeared, massive and ancient, covered in symbols that predated the Council by millennia. On the rim, we found the ruins of 3 civilizations that existed long before any of your species reached the stars. The Architects, the Nexus, the First Wanderers. They were ancient when your ancestors were still learning to use tools. They reached heights of technology and understanding that make current galactic civilization look primitive. Matriarch Yilsara of the Ashkari Collective pulsed with pale light. That is impossible. We have surveyed the galaxy. There are no such ruins, because you never looked in the places that scared you, Min-Jun replied. The rim is dangerous. Strange gravity wells, unstable stars, regions where normal physics break down. You avoided those places. We did not have that luxury. We went where we had to go, to survive. And we found wonders. More images appeared, star maps showing jump routes that should not exist. Energy diagrams depicting power generation on scales that violated known physics. Schematics for devices whose purposes were not immediately clear but were obviously powerful. The ancients left behind their knowledge, Minjun said. Not in languages we could read at first, but in mathematics and physics and engineering so elegant that it transcends language. It took us 50 years just to begin understanding what we found. Another century to start implementing it. But we learned. Ever. He gestured again, and the holographic images changed to show human ships. Not the clunky, functional designs the Council remembered, but sleek vessels of impossible beauty, ships that looked alive, organic, more like creatures than machines, quantum fold drives that compress space-time itself, zero-point energy extraction that provides effectively unlimited power, adaptive AI systems that work in symbiosis with biological minds, gravitic manipulation that allows us to create localized fields, making our ships immune to conventional weapons. And that is just the beginning. Representative Veksh of the Kresh Dominion stood, his hood flaring. This is a threat. You return with ancient weapons to threaten the species that exiled you. This is why we expelled you in the first place. No. Minjun's voice cut through the chamber like a blade. You expelled us because you feared what we might become. You were not wrong to fear. But you were wrong about what you should fear. He turned slowly, looking at every delegate in turn. You should have feared our anger. You should have feared our hunger for revenge. You should have feared that we would return with overwhelming force and pay you back for every life lost, every child who starved, every family torn apart by your exile. The chamber was silent, waiting for the other shoe to drop. But that is not what happened. Minjun continued, his voice softening slightly. Because somewhere in those 200 years of suffering, we learned something that you have forgotten. Power without wisdom is just another form of extinction. Revenge, without purpose, is just another way to die. And anger, no matter how justified, does not bring back the dead. He gestured at his honor guards. These soldiers could level a city. The ship that brought us here could sterilize a planet. We have the ability to make you pay for what you did to us. But what would that accomplish? Would it return the 8 billion we lost? Would it undo 2 centuries of exile? Would it make the galaxy safer, or better, or more just? Zixtar rose from his seat. Then why did you return, Admiral? What does humanity want? The same thing we wanted 200 years ago, Minjun said. To be left alone. To defend our own. To have a voice in galactic affairs. To stand as equals rather than as subjects or victims. He paused. And to share what we learned. Because the galaxy is going to need it very soon. Grand Arbiter Kelvin's scales darkened with suspicion. What do you mean? Minjun's expression turned grave. The ancient civilizations we found did not die of old age or internal conflicts. They were destroyed, wiped out by something from outside the galaxy, something that returns every few million years to reset civilizations that have grown too advanced. The architects called it the score. The Nexus called it the extinction wheel. The first wanderers just called it the end. He pulled up new images, alien ships of a design that looked diseased, wrong, like they violated aesthetic and mathematical principles simultaneously. And it is coming back. Our long-range sensors have detected the first scout forces entering the galaxy through breaches near where we settled. It will reach Council space in approximately 5 years. Maybe less. 500 and scout forces. 1. Maybe less. The chamber erupted. Some delegates shouted disbelief, others demanded proof. A few looked terrified, as if they somehow recognized the threat Minjun described. You lie, Vex shouted. This is a trick to make us vulnerable. To make us accept you back out of fear. I have no reason to lie, Minjun said calmly. If we wanted you destroyed, we would have already done it. If we wanted revenge, we would have taken it. We returned because despite everything you did to us, you are still our neighbors. And when the score come, they will not care about your politics or our grievances. They will only care that we are all alive and need to die. Matriarch Yilsara pulsed with rapid colors. If what you say is true, why did these ancient civilizations fail? Why should we believe you can succeed where they failed? Why? 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 Because they fought alone, Minjun said. Each civilization tried to defend itself separately. The architects fell. The Nexus fell. The first wanderers fell. But we found their records. We learned from their mistakes. And we know that unified, working together, we might stand a chance. He took a deep breath. That is why we returned. Not for revenge. Not for conquest. But to offer our strength to defend a galaxy that cast us out. Because that is what humans do. We protect. We endure. We refuse to give up even when giving up would be easier. It is our greatest strength and our most terrible weakness. We cannot help ourselves. Grand Arbiter Kelvin was silent for a long moment. Then he said, "You claim to have this advanced technology, proof of ancient civilizations, evidence of an approaching threat, yet you offer no verification. How do we know this is not an elaborate deception?" Minjun smiled. "Because if we wanted to deceive you, we would be much better at it. No, Grand Arbiter. Everything I have told you is true, and within a standard year, you will have all the proof you need. The first score vanguard forces will reach your border territories. You will face them with your current technology and fleets, and you will learn what the ancients learned, that you are hopelessly outmatched." "That sounds like a threat," Kelvin said coldly. "It is a warning." Minjun corrected. "There is a difference. A threat implies I want something bad to happen to you. A warning means I want to prevent something bad from happening, but I cannot force you to listen." He looked around the chamber. The Council exiled humanity for being too strong, too dangerous, too unpredictable. Now I stand before you stronger, more dangerous, and infinitely more unpredictable than before. And I am offering to fight for you anyway. Not because you deserve it, not because we forgive you, but because it is the right thing to do. Zixtar spoke up again. "The Council must vote on humanity's reinstatement. But perhaps we should also vote on accepting your warning, on preparing for this threat you describe. Vote however you wish," Minjun said. "Humanity will fight the score whether we have your blessing or not. We have already begun fortifying the rim. We are building defensive stations and early warning systems. When the score come, they will find us ready. Whether you stand with us or not is your choice." He turned to leave, his guards falling into step behind him. But before he reached the chamber doors, Kelvin called out, "Admiral Lee, if we were to reinstate humanity, if we were to work together, what would you ask in return?" "Admiral." 3rd D. 2. Minjun looked back over his shoulder. "3 things. First, prosecute the raiders who have been attacking civilian ships for the past 2 centuries. Stop pretending you do not know who they really are. Second, grant sovereignty to any species that requests it. No more forced protection. No more vassal states. And third," he smiled coldly, "apologize. Formally. Publicly. Admit that exiling humanity was wrong. I do not need it for my sake. But the billions who died in that first decade deserve at least that much recognition of their sacrifice." Then he was gone, the massive doors closing behind him with a boom that echoed through the silent chamber. Zixtar looked around at his fellow delegates. Some looked angry. Some looked frightened. Many looked thoughtful, calculating what humanity's return meant for them personally. "Well," Zixtar clicked, "I believe we have much to discuss. The galaxy was about to change. The only question was whether it would change through cooperation or through catastrophe. Either way, humanity had come home. And this time, no one was strong enough to exile them again." The emergency signal cut through every communication channel in Council space simultaneously. No delay. No buffering. No translation lag. One moment, the galaxy was going about its business. The next, every ship, Every station, every major settlement, received the same message. It was not a request. It was a warning. Score Vanguard forces have breached the galactic barrier at coordinates designated Breach Point Alpha. All military forces are advised to evacuate civilian populations from Outer Rim territories. This is not a drill. The extinction has begun. The message was not from the Council. It came from humanity's deep space monitoring network. The sensor arrays they had been quietly deploying for the past year, while the Council debated whether to reinstate them. In the Grand Council chamber, the debate ended immediately. Visual confirmation, Grand Arbiter Kelvin demanded, his scales pale with stress. Show us what we are facing. The holographic displays flickered to life. What appeared made several delegates gasp or emit their species equivalent of horror. The score ships were visible now, hundreds of them pouring through a tear in space-time that glowed with sickly purple light. The ships themselves defied description, organic and mechanical at once, covered in what looked like diseased growths, moving in patterns that hurt to watch. Fleet composition analysis, Kelvin's military advisor reported, her voice shaking. At least 300 capital ships, thousands of support craft. Energy readings are off scale. They are heading in system toward the Keltar colonies. Population 3 billion. Estimated time to contact: 4 hours. Dispatch the 5th Battle Group, Kelvin ordered. All available forces to intercept and engage. We must buy time for evacuation. Already moving, the advisor confirmed. Admiral Sethis is in command. The fleet will reach engagement range in 2 hours. The Council watched through live feeds as their military mobilized. The 5th Battle Group was impressive, 100 warships, including a dozen heavy cruisers. Pride of the Velrothi Empire. They formed up in a defensive grid, ready to protect the Keltar colonies. The score did not slow down. They did not attempt communication. They just kept coming. A vast swarm of impossible ships that moved through space like disease through a body. Contact came 2 hours and 17 minutes after the first warning. The Council members watched in real time as their fleet opened fire. Plasma cannons lit up the void. Missile batteries unleashed their payloads. Kinetic accelerators hurled projectiles at relativistic speeds. Everything the Velrothi had. Everything they had built and designed and refined over centuries of warfare. Nothing worked. The score ships absorbed the attacks. Energy weapons seemed to make them stronger. Physical projectiles passed through them as if they were not entirely present in normal space. And then the score returned fire. What came from the score vessels was not weapons in any conventional sense. It was disintegration. Reality failure. Matter simply stopped existing where the score beams touched it. Ships did not explode, they ceased, their atoms scattering into quantum foam. The 5th Battle Group lasted 8 minutes. 100 warships, thousands of trained soldiers, centuries of military tradition. Gone in 8 minutes. The silence in the Council chamber was absolute. They had just watched an entire fleet die, and the score had barely slowed down. Now, nothing stood between those impossible ships and 3 billion civilians. Evacuate the colonies, Kelvin said quietly. His voice held defeat. Get as many out as possible. Kelvin 7. Get as many out as possible. There is not enough time, his advisor said. The score will reach Keltar in 90 minutes. We have maybe 30 transports in range. We can save maybe 100,000. If we are lucky, then we save who we can, Kelvin said. He looked suddenly old, his scales dull. And we prepare the rest of the fleet to belay that order. The voice came from the chamber's communication system. Every delegate recognized it immediately. Admiral Minjun Lee of the Terran Reclamation Fleet. Humanity is engaging the score, Minjun continued. Evacuate the colonies, but do not send more council ships. You will only die uselessly. We will handle this. You cannot possibly have enough forces in range, Kelvin protested. The score just destroyed 100 warships. We only need 1, Minjun replied. The displays shifted. showing a new contact appearing on sensors. A single ship emerging from jump space between the Score fleet and Keltar. It was massive, dwarfing even the largest Velrathi battleships. Its hull was the same impossible dark material that seemed to drink light. Energy crackled across its surface in patterns that looked almost alive. "This is the TRFS Resilience." Minjun's voice came through again. "All Score forces, you are in violation of the ancient compact. Withdraw or be destroyed." The Score did not withdraw. 1,000 ships turned toward the human dreadnought and fired. What followed was not a battle. It was a demonstration. The Resilience did not dodge. It did not hide behind shields. The Score weapons hit at full force, the same disintegration beams that had erased 100 Velrathi ships. And they did nothing. The hull absorbed the attacks, the same dark material seeming to process and neutralize the exotic physics that made Score weapons so deadly. Then the Resilience fired back. Light erupted from the human ship. Not the crude plasma or kinetic weapons the Council used, but something that looked like concentrated reality itself. Beams of pure white energy that carved through the Score fleet like a blade through water. Where the beams touched Score vessels, they simply vanished, not destroyed, not scattered, but unmade at a fundamental level. The Resilience rotated slowly, its weapons tracking and eliminating targets with mechanical precision. The Score tried to swarm it. Hundreds of ships converging from all sides. The human dreadnought's point defense activated. Thousands of smaller energy projectors, each one capable of erasing a Score ship from existence. The space around Resilience became a sphere of annihilation. Nothing could get close. Nothing could survive. In the council chamber, delegates watched in silence as a single human ship systematically destroyed a fleet that had killed 100 council vessels in minutes. The Score tried different tactics, focusing fire, attempting to board, even ramming the human ship with their own vessels. Nothing worked. The Resilience was invulnerable and unstoppable. Within 20 minutes, the Score fleet was gone. Every ship, either destroyed or driven back through the breach they came from. The Resilience hung in space, undamaged, its dark hull reflecting the light of Keltar's star. "Threat neutralized," Minjun reported calmly. "Casualties, 0. The breach is collapsing naturally. We will maintain watch to ensure no further incursions." "How?" Kelvin's voice was barely a whisper. "How is this possible?" "We learned from the ancients," Minjun said. "They failed because they fought separately. Each civilization developed its own solutions, its own weapons. The Score adapted to each one in turn. But the ancients left records, blueprints, theories they never had time to test. We synthesized everything they knew and built something new, something the Score have not adapted to yet." Another ship appeared on sensors. Then another. Then dozens more. The human fleet, emerging from jump space around Keltar. Not as many as the Score had brought, but each one radiating power signatures that matched the Resilience. "We have positioned defensive grids throughout the border territories," Minjun continued. "Early warning stations that will detect any further Score breaches. And we have the firepower to respond immediately. The Council colonies are protected, whether you want our protection or not." In the background of the transmission, other voices could be heard. Humans coordinating rescue efforts, directing medical supplies, organizing evacuation support for the few Keltar citizens who still needed transport. They were not just fighting. They were helping. Ambassador Zixtar rose from his seat. "Admiral Lee, on behalf of the Galactic Council, I formally request that humanity resume its seat among us. We were wrong to exile you. We were fools to fear you. And we are grateful beyond words that you returned when you did." Seconded. Called out several other voices. Even some of the delegates who had voted for humanity's exile 200 years ago added their support. Not all Vex and a few others remained silent, pride or fear keeping them from admitting error. But enough. More than enough. Kelvin stood slowly. His scales had regained some of their color, but his eyes were haunted. The Velrathi Empire formally apologizes for the exile of humanity 2 centuries ago. We acknowledge that our actions were motivated by fear and resulted in the deaths of billions of innocent people. We cannot undo what was done, but we can ensure it never happens again. We accept your apology, Minjun said, and we accept reinstatement to the Council. But let us be clear, humanity does not return as the naive species we were before. We have changed, we have grown, and we will never again allow anyone to threaten our sovereignty or our people. Understood, Kelvin said, and acknowledged. What do you need from us? Help us evacuate and treat the wounded from Keltar. Share your intelligence on score movements, and prepare your people for what is coming. This was just the vanguard. The main score force is still months away. We have time to prepare, but only if we work together. Over the following weeks, the galaxy transformed. Human technology and knowledge flowed outward, not as gifts, but as trades. The Council provided resources, labor, worlds to build on. Humanity provided the tools to survive what was coming. Ships were upgraded with defensive systems based on ancient designs. Early warning networks expanded across entire sectors. Training programs taught Council militaries how to recognize and counter score tactics. And everywhere, humans worked alongside aliens, building the unified defense that the ancient civilizations had never achieved. Jia Park, Jiwan's granddaughter, took humanity's seat in the Council chamber. She was young, barely 40. But she carried herself with the same dignity her grandmother had shown 2 centuries before. On her first day, she addressed the assembled delegates. My grandmother stood where I stand now and watched you exile humanity for the crime of being strong. She told you then that you were making a mistake, that you should fear what you were turning us into. She was right. The chamber was silent, delegates listening carefully to every word. You should have feared our anger. You should have feared our revenge. But you should have hoped that suffering would teach us wisdom instead of just hardening our hatred. Hoped that exile would forge us into something greater rather than just something crueler. Jia's voice softened. 200 years ago, humanity left this chamber with nothing but our pride and our determination to survive. We lost half our population. We buried billions. We suffered in ways that would have broken most species. And you know what we learned? She looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes of representatives from 100 different worlds. We learned that power means nothing if not used to protect. That strength, without compassion, is just another form of weakness. And that the greatest victories are not won through revenge, but through choosing to be better than those who hurt you. She gestured at the holographic displays, showing human ships patrolling the borders, protecting worlds that had voted for humanity's exile. You cast us out. We have returned to defend you. You tried to make us weak. We became strong enough to save you. You feared what we might become. We became exactly what the galaxy needed. Jia smiled. That is humanity. We are survivors who refuse to let suffering turn us into the monsters others fear. We are warriors who choose to protect rather than conquer. We are the species you tried to destroy, returned to ensure you never have to face extinction alone. She took her seat among the delegates, and for the first time in 200 years, humanity's place in the Council was filled. Outside, the stars shone steadily. Human ships moved through the void, tireless guardians watching for threats. In shipyards across human space, more vessels took shape, not weapons of conquest, but shields for the innocent. And far beyond the rim, monitoring stations searched the dark between galaxies for signs of the score's return. Humanity had been exiled. They had suffered. They had died by billions. And they had emerged from that crucible transformed into something the galaxy had never seen, a species with the power to dominate, but the wisdom to protect instead. The score would come again. The ancient enemy would test whether this cycle of civilizations was any different from the countless others that had been harvested before. And when they came, they would find something new. They would find a galaxy united, standing together, armed with knowledge from the fallen, and protected by those who had learned that true strength came not from the power to destroy, but from the choice to defend. They would find humanity, returned from exile, rekindled with strength that surpassed empires, and they would learn that some species, when pushed to the edge of extinction, do not break. They evolve. Retry Claude can make mistakes. Please double-check responses.